Hello and welcome to our bite-sized 30-minute session brought to you in partnership with Snapshotz, AusContact's accreditation partner, in which we'll be grilling me about my thoughts for the last 10 years and that it's a wrap. In the spirit of reconciliation, AusContact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I'm Fiona Keough and the outgoing CEO of AusContact, and I'm being grilled. And to grill me today, I'm very pleased to introduce our familiar presenter, Deepak Selvaratnam, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Snapshotz. Apparently I have a lot to share. However, if you do have a burning question, please ask using the Q&A button on the control panel. And if we have time, we'll ask those questions at the end of the bite. If we don't get to your question and you are anonymous, however, we're unable to respond after the bite as we don't actually know who you are. If you're having technical issues, please note that on the control panel, you can click the raise hand button and the AusContact team will rush to your aid. Or you can actually revert to the confirmation email with the link to the webinar, and all of the relevant phone numbers and access codes are available there for you. And with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Deepak to the microphone. Hi, Deepak, for the last time.
Indeed, Fiona, it is going to be the last time, but not probably the last time too. First of all, I must apologize to anybody listening to my 21-year-old cat in the background. She's complaining that I haven't given her food when she's got a mound of food behind her.
It's not her food. It's not what she picked, Deepak.
This is the issue. This is the issue for sure, Fiona. And that's actually perhaps not quite the segue, but I did want, nobody needs an introduction to Fiona Keough. However, what I do want to say is, in terms of the experiences and the vision and what we've seen over this decade, what Fiona has been able to do is to have a vision and to be able and the ability to make do with what she had. And that's something that I've realized and noticed over the last 10 years, because that's a critical piece for a CEO, to make do with what you have. Secondly, the AusContact Association and the content within there is today rich and probably up there, certainly within Asia and other parts of the world, rich in content. And I think, Fiona, you orchestrated that very well. Thirdly, what I have seen and you've set in place is a platform for us to go to the next level of CX. Not just in Australia, but across the world. So you set the platform there. And I say thank you very much to all those looking to launch off the platform. We ourselves have benefited from that. So we're going to further benefit over the next 20 odd minutes from her experience, where we want to really not necessarily grill her, but extract from her the gems around how she's seen the industry, how things like training and technology and the center itself, how we viewed it over the years, what's changed, and of course, some closing thoughts. However, just a bit of background for those of you who do not know, Snapshotz is an audit and benchmarking tool that's got about 3,500 customers and is a holistic approach to understanding the health of your contact center, as well as benchmark in real time across global standards where your contact center sits, and importantly, drive your strategy and resources forward with, of course, engaging your customers and your folk as well. Now, over these last 18 months or so, we've been able to provide little short sessions where we draw from data, the Snapshotz data, to provide you with little insights that you can apply across the center. So without much more ado, let's go to Fiona straight away and say, Fiona, you've been in a significantly advantageous position, seeing the little milestones of contact center industry move from crayons to perfume. Give us your platform, your vision, what you've seen.
So what have I seen? Well, I've seen To Sir With Love, let's face it, and I'm no Lulu, so I'm not going to sing To Sir With Love, but have we gone from crayons to perfume? Let me share a few things. So I'm going to say that when I started 120 years ago, 44 years ago, that I probably started in the crayon era, where we measured, all we ever measured was how many calls we took per day. And I can remember how proud I was when I could see at the end of the day that I had taken 125 calls. Now, it didn't matter whether I did a good job or a bad job. It's just that I'd gotten through 125 calls and the little clicker could tell me that. The watershed moments, I guess, in the last decade, you know, let's face it, the biggest watershed that we had was COVID, and, you know, the yin and the yang that COVID brought, it certainly pushed people into some actions that they weren't necessarily ready to do. It kind of drove them, you know, if I don't do it now, when am I ever going to do it? And I guess that's kind of where I went with it. But it brought a lot of activity. It also has a lot of hype associated with it because we're being told that everyone's automated everything, and, you know, and bots are everywhere, and we know when we survey that bots aren't everywhere. They are somewhere, but they are not necessarily everywhere. There is no doubt that we've certainly moved from call to contact center to CX or customer hub or whatever label you want to use. And it's been largely driven, dare I say it, by the availability of the technology platforms enablers. Do I think that we've necessarily asked our customers what channel, what platform they want? We've just very much bought whatever is available to us and said we'll use it. So I'll use an example from when I worked in a bank a little while ago, and our mantra was drive them to the web. Let's drive customers to the web. Now, that was another saying for drive people to self-service. Did our customers want to go to self-service? We actually didn't ask the question. What we did know, having worked out the return on investment, that it was going to reduce costs, i.e. headcount in the contact center and all that usual stuff. So let me reflect on whether we're perfume. No, I don't think you will ever get to be perfume because your customers' requirements are constantly evolving, and they're really the only ones that can determine whether you're perfume. Part of the challenge with that is that contact centers, sadly, have not reached the C-suite in terms of their strategic importance within the organisation. But it is one of the positives that's come out of COVID-19 is that many organisations have now recognised that the contact centre was the only way they could remain connected with their customers when retail outlets, etc., had to close the business. Then I'm going to look at CX as part of this because it's all part of that continuum. Contact centre is not responsible for CX. CX belongs to the enterprise. The contact centre is responsible for delivering one of the key pillars, and that's service, whether it's within sales or within service. CX is the whole shebang. It's the service, the product, the ease of access, the process, the channel, the timing, the pricing, the fulfillment of the promise, and it, of course, is inextricably linked to how engaged your people are. Now, I'm also going to add a chestnut because I couldn't leave you without something to think about. Do you measure your customer experience by an immediate post-call survey? Is it measured by quality? Is it measured by using a survey via email or SMS sometime after the call or the interaction has been completed? Is it by mystery shopping? Is it by channel? Is it by recording 100% of the interactions and using AI to determine the CX? And is measuring CX and attributing to the contact center alone appropriate? If I kept talking about it, we need the whole bite. I will give you an example of a conference that I spoke at, international conference. One of my fellow speakers was consulting in the CX space, and he said your CX or CSAT target, sorry, I said it was a he, should be 100%. I'm going to leave you to decide on the value of this statement. And also then that leads to the debate about meaningful KPIs, and that will ensure that the promises made by CEOs about differentiating via service are actually delivered.
Indeed, Fiona. We're going to come back to you on those very interesting and insightful little gems you've thrown now. I particularly like the fact that we've not quite got to perfume as yet, but plainly because we've not reached the C-suite. But that's another a question coming up. Just moving on to the link between training and effectiveness of the contact center, we found that there is a gap between the competencies and skills that a contact center has and the ability for it to deliver. I know that AusContact in itself has a range of training programs and competency type programs that you run, but tell me, what have you seen? What are your thoughts, very particularly in relation to contact center effectiveness?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Deepak, because some organisations and contact centres do it particularly well, and of course there's quite a range of outcomes. So what we see particularly through our awards program, and it's one of the things that we ask about, is how effective is your training, and how do you know that your training has been effective? So what do we find is missing? And year on year we see similar sorts of things seeping through in what's presented to us. Speed to competency is not necessarily used as a measure of success. And then if it is, it may not be broken down by time period. So at 1 month, I expect this, at 3 months, I expect this, at 6 months, I expect that. And your KPIs or your targets are actually moving in a similar way. We don't see people assessing training module outcomes. What they tend to do is assess that someone turned up, rather than knowing that they've actually taken in the learnings that are being delivered. The measurement of error rates and linking that back to quality outcomes so that it comes back to the training team that then rebuilds that back in understanding where are the mistakes being made and what can I do differently to ensure that these things don't happen in the first place. Finding out why the training's not effective. Ask your customers. Your customers are the people that are undertaking the training. Ask them why it's not hitting home. Is it the way that they're learning? Is it because it's online versus face-to-face versus how people like to learn? And adult learning, of course, is different. Do you measure the trainer's competency? I'm a shocking trainer because I assume knowledge. I know I assume knowledge. But you need to ask what that trainer is doing well and what their trainer is not doing well, and invest in that trainer. They deserve that as well. How do you know that the content that you're delivering is current? Are you linking back into your knowledge management system, or are you doing the training that you've always done? What is the turnover rate? How many people leave the organisation during the training period? It's usually an indicator that the training is not hitting home, it's not engaging, or perhaps the culture isn't where it needs to be. Another indicator, unplanned absenteeism. right? I don't care if I don't turn up, it doesn't matter. And the other thing that's a real hangover from the dark ages is there's still that focus on system navigation and do I understand what my products and services are about, rather than investing in emotional intelligence or empathy, or what used to be called soft skills. And I'm not so keen on the soft skilly term, really. And we know emotional intelligence can be trained. It's not something that is only innate.
True.
More often than not, the other thing that we tend to do is that we focus on only equipping our agents and forget that team leaders and leaders don't necessarily know how to lead automatically. I don't know, Deepak, when I became a parent for the first time, I had no clue how to be a parent, and it didn't just happen. Didn't just arrive when my firstborn arrived. I had to learn, I had to find out how to be a leader of that child. So they need investment on how to coach. They need business acumen. They need to learn how to communicate. Leading leaders is also different to leading staff, and leading virtually or cross-culturally also brings about other dimensions. So this is like a huge question that you want answered, and I'm trying to push everything into a very short period of time.
We have, Fiona, we want to make maximum use of your 10 years plus. And with that, let me get on to ask you yet another one, and one quite close to my own heart and my own philosophy and approach to contact center management, is that there is a significant increase of abuse of frontline staff by customers. Now it's getting harder to recruit staff. It's getting harder to keep them and keep them motivated. What do you think organizations should be doing? Because our stats are saying that they're not even looking at why, what are the reasons why customers are abusing staff to begin with.
Yeah, and Deepak, even going back to when I started on the phones in 1978, it was one of the things that we dealt with, maybe not 125 times a day, but it was certainly a prevalent activity. I actually think it's the channel that somewhat empowers your customer to treat you poorly because they have a degree of anonymity. Is it getting worse? Yes, because we've raised customer expectations, and customer expectations are higher. When you've got a CEO that says that they're going to differentiate their organisation by the service that they're delivering, and those service expectations may have been let down at the shop front, at the website, or wherever it might be, most people are not ringing up to say thank you to the organisation for bill shock or non-delivery of a product. But what we're seeing is the likelihood of people to express themselves more strongly than maybe they did in the days. And of course, the prevalence of I know where you live, I know where your family is, etc., and those threats that come. We are also more aware of it, I think, because we now have the tools and equipment that enable us to hear sentiment. We're recording 100% of calls, so that is making us far more aware of it. When you hear a CEO of a certain airline making public statements about how passengers are not travel fit, and then not recruiting sufficient people to manage the volumes that are coming in, where else are customers likely to want to let off steam? And I'm not saying it's appropriate, but that's what they do. We, of course, have to, part of our training is to equip our people to be able to manage through that. And this is the emotional labor that they have, because bing, I'm switched on. When the next customer comes on, and before I know it, they've got an AK-47, that's a metaphorical AK-47, and they're just blasting me. And teaching and helping people to understand that the customer is not annoyed at you personally. They're actually annoyed with the organisation or the product that they have, but they know of no other way. They haven't been taught how to vent their frustration in an appropriate way. And as we know, mental health is more prevalent in terms of issues around that. And it's our customers, as well as our staff, as well as our leaders. And we need to also invest in helping our people to recognise when our customers have hardship, but when our people are having hardship as well in terms of managing. What can we do about it? And I guess, part of it is getting the right people. And as you know, emotional intelligence is incredibly important, and empathy. It's an employee's market at the moment, and I think that's going to be for a little while until certainly immigration steps up a little bit into Australia. We've also automated all the simple stuff, so you don't get the relief of a simple question anymore. Everything that you're doing with a customer these days is going deep, right? You're really talking about complex issues. We're looking for high caliber people. We're also seeing salaries increasing to attract the right talent. But is salary actually everything, or is money nothing more than a short-term motivator? How should we step up? If I would think about it, I would think at the heart of it is your employee value proposition. That has to be key. Do you have your employee at the centre of your employee proposition, or is your organisation sitting at the centre of an employee value proposition, right? So it's not a company value proposition. Do you know what's driving your people to work? Do your people have purpose? Are they able to link their personal values to what it is they're doing? Are you providing flexibility? I read a recent article saying where frontline staff that were interviewed, an overwhelming majority of them said they would not apply for a role that did not provide flexibility. And then a further proportion also stated that they would also work for less money if they could work from home. So there's a whole bunch of things that need to be considered through that, but supporting and training your leaders to be able to support your people is going to be key going forward. Deepak, back to you. We may have lost Deepak. He's a frozen moment. All right. So Deepak was going to ask me a question about contact centre technology and whether technologies have actually changed the approach to contact centre management. And apparently I'm to give some hints to suppliers to the industry, which I would not deign to do. But what I would like to start off with talking about is the Gartner hype cycle, which we've all been on. I know I have. I've been at the top of the hype cycle, and then I've fallen off, and then I've come back. And if you fall into the trap of following, religiously the Gartner hype cycle, then you know that if you're at the top, you're what the next best thing that everybody must adopt and as quickly as possible, and that's why it's risen to the top. But then you find, I guess natural language speech recognition might be one of them that's kind of dropped off. It wasn't as well adopted as it might be. I must say, though, that being said, I actually do love technology, and one of the many roles that I've been privileged to have was in a technology capacity. And I've also been on the leading edge, I've been on the bleeding edge, I've been in various circumstances. Technology is great. It's actually assisted us, is how I see it, in providing opportunities to understand better what is happening, get access to information and data far more readily, far more easily, rather than waiting for somebody to almost sit there with an abacus and madly draw out the numbers, because we're all very numbers driven naturally as contact centre people. Does the technology always deliver what we think it's going to deliver? Yes, it's a yes and no answer. Of course, I'm never going to give you a straight answer. It's a bit of a yes and no. Does it deliver what it promises. I've been in the position where some technology we've implemented actually took us 12 months to get it to where the salespeople had told us it would be on day one. So, you know, not always successful. But information and understanding what's happening is absolutely one of the keys of technology. And of course, accessibility makes a huge difference. What I do love is that the landscape is constantly evolving. And as long as we keep our two keys in mind, that is our people and our customers, the technologies will always be there to underpin what it is we wish to achieve or to take us to the next level. So Deepak, I've just done around the world in 80 days on technology.
Well, thank you very much again, Fiona. My next door neighbor's been digging up the garden again, and he sliced through our internet, through our fiber.
And we say thank you very much for that.
Amen. So thank you very much for working through the question around technology and communications and how things have changed over the years. I know we are really going short for time, and I do want to you know, get as much as we can from those little diamonds that you're throwing. So the question, I never
throw little diamonds, Deepak. They're always big.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon, nephew. Yes. Well, look, is today customer service an art or a science? Because the challenge for many today is that we don't really, oftentimes, you know, we don't fully understand what it is about, how much it is, what we need to do. Looking at, you know, even doing self-assessments or assessments, we find that it's all too challenging. But importantly, are we still an art, or are we a science, or are we both?
Well, Deepak, you know what I'm going to say here. Having been a workforce planner for a significant period of time, and as part of my training, and it's still tattooed on my forehead, it's not a debate for me. A contact centre is made up of science and art. And the way I think about it is the science is the data and the analytics, and the art is the human factor. It's the human touch. It's using your judgment with that information. So you have the empirical stuff and you have the emotional stuff, and you put it together. So if you only approach it from one dimension, you're actually missing out on the full picture. You're actually missing out on the opportunity to go that one step further, where you can actually be the best version of your organisation.
Well, look, that is very, very true, Fiona. There is science and there is art, and they do combine in this whole thing called the contact center or customer service. Now, it is traditional as we get towards the end of the piece for you to ask me what are your closing thoughts, but let me turn that back and ask you, what are your closing thoughts? But before actually I say that, I want to say, I want to see if there are any questions that have come about from your session. Until one of us actually looks at and to see if there are any. There's one question I did want to ask you as you were talking through this whole, through some of the questions I asked. Fiona, do you see, where do you see contact centers going in the next few years? Do you have any thoughts around where you see them going, or what you think needs to be going?
I see them as evolving, and I think that's the most exciting and wonderful thing about being in contact centres. In any business, the change, the pace of change, how dynamic you need to be. I believe that certain channels will take over. I still think humans haven't evolved sufficiently that they don't want to have the human touch. So will the jobs look different? You bet they'll look different. Will they be probably more challenging? Absolutely, they will be more challenging and more technical. But I think if I said I knew, I would be limiting the opportunity that I think is out there. And I actually think the sky's the limit in terms of what contact centres may or may not be in the future. Apparently, we now have a question, Deepak.
Yeah. What is the single best tip you can give people in the contact center industry today, Michael Clark?
Well, that's a hard one, Michael. It's a great question. Is there one tip? What I would say is do something that you love, do something that you totally enjoy. And, you know, the beauty of contact centres is you can work within the human aspect, you can work within technology, and you can move between both. You can be a leader, you may move from a voice channel to a chat channel or whatever it might be, but do something that you feel fits with your values, that you feel you're being fairly paid for, and that you're with an organisation that actually delivers on the employee value proposition and the culture where you will thrive. Great nursery for a career. Look at me. Who would have thought? Who would have thunk?
Indeed. Fiona, that is so very true, because I think it was Robert Louis Stevenson who said, pick a job you love to do and you'd never have to work a single day.
Yep. Well, apparently I haven't worked for the last 10 years, so don't tell the board that, for heaven's sake.
Well, look, I think that's more than apparent in the legacy you've left behind. So, Fiona, thank you very much. Our time's come to an end, unfortunately. So thank you very much for all the support and importantly for today's gems and big diamonds that you've thrown at us. We are indeed blessed and thankful for your contribution, as we at Snapshotz are. So thank you very much, and thank you once again to everyone listening in.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are.